So I'm going to talk a little bit about the cryptography behind Bitcoin, what makes it work. And yesterday I got a lot of questions from people about how it works underlying of it. So today I thought I'll just elaborate a little bit more on that. There are two main features of Bitcoin. It is peer-to-peer and it's fully decentralized. So what makes it decentralized and peer-to-peer? There are two things that make it like this. One is the rules that are embedded in the software that the client that everybody uses. So that ensures that everybody is using the same set of rules. And then there is some cryptography behind it. So in the cryptography, there are three main things that Bitcoin uses. So they're called hash functions, then digital signatures, and something called mining. So I'll talk about each of these three things. So that's the only thing you need to understand Bitcoin. So what's a hash function? Hash function basically is a function, a program that takes as an input any string and outputs a short string or a value. So the string can be any size, the input can be any size, but the output is a fixed short size. So obviously there cannot be a unique mapping. So several inputs can map to the same string. So as an example, we'll just take the first two characters of every string, and that's a hash function. So because it outputs only a 2-character value. But it's not a good hash function, like not good for cryptography. So as an example, this is a hash function. But what's a cryptographic hash function? Basically, given the output, it is very hard to compute the input. If you don't know the input, then you have to find the input using brute force, trial and error. That's the only way you can find it. And given any one input and you have finding another input that gives the same hash value, it's also a difficult task. So there are some properties of a good hash function. And Bitcoin uses SHA-256, which outputs a 256-bit random looking value as the hash. So it's not very difficult to understand hash functions. I'll not elaborate more on that. The second thing that makes Bitcoin work is digital signatures. So this is something that is more interesting and more important to understand. So I'll talk a little bit more on this. So what exactly is a digital signature? So it's a type of public key cryptography. What it means is that if I give you a message M and a secret key, a signature can be computed using these two things. And that can be verified using another key, a public key called PK. And these SK and PK come in pairs. So each SK has one unique PK corresponding to it. And PK is public, that everybody can know, while SK is the secret value known only to the signer. So given M and PK, it is hard to generate the signature. But given SK, it is easy to generate the signature. It is easy to verify the signature given the public key. So maybe I'll just leave it for a second so you can read it yourself. I'll try to give a more layman's example in the next slide. What exactly is a digital signature? So it's a toy example, it's not a secure example, but it probably will help you understand how digital signatures work. So as an example, I'll assume that you mix two colors in a certain quantity. So it's easy to mix colors, but if I give you a mixture of several colors and I tell you some of them, but not all of them, it's hard to find the other colors. You have to do trial and error. Let's make an assumption like that. Obviously, it's not true, but it's easy to imagine that something like that, And cryptography works the same, but instead of colors, we use numbers. So what happens is that suppose, let's have a public color called red, R, which is known to everybody in the entire world. It's a public parameter. And my secret key is a secret color X. So X is unknown value. That's why I call it X. And public key is this color Y, which is a mixture of X and R, 1 liter of each, for example, So X plus R is my public key, and X is my secret key. And how does signatures work? So let M, the message be 1 liter of M. It can be many, 2 liters or 3 liters, but for simplicity, let's assume that the message is 1 liter of color M. So the signature will be some value S, such that S plus R is equal to M plus Y. So when I mix X, S and R, the output will be the same as mixing Y, M plus Y. So if you look at it, the right side of this, M plus Y, that is public information, right? M is the message that everybody knows, and Y is the public key that everybody knows. So we can compute the right-hand side, and left-hand side can be computed from the signature. So once we compute both, we compare them. If they're equal, then the signature is valid, otherwise it's not. So assuming that it's hard to remove colors, right? That means it is hard to compute S without knowing X. So if you look at it carefully, you will see what I'm telling, instead of me trying to explain it. And knowing X, we can compute that S. We simply put 1 liter of M and 1 liter of X, and we have a signature, and it can be verified. So let's check if it verifies correctly or not. So you mix S plus R, which is basically S is equal to M plus X, so it becomes M plus X plus R. And X plus R is simply Y. So it is basically M plus Y. So it's equal to the right-hand side. So you can verify that the signature is true. but only somebody with knowledge of X can generate such a signature. Yeah. So that's how public key cryptography works. But instead of colors, we use numbers. So that's the two things that make Bitcoin work. The third thing is called proof of work, yeah? Or mining is a fancy term for that. So what exactly is a proof of work? What it means is that to gain something, you must do some work, yeah? So here, for example, it's a CAPTCHA that some website has. So here, to get into the website, you have to solve this CAPTCHA, and this CAPTCHA gives you a hard maths problem to solve. And once you give the right answer, then it will let you into the site. So that's like a lot of hard work for a human, you know? So this is a proof of work system for a human. In Bitcoin, we use proof of work for computers, you know. So this kind of thing is very difficult for computers if you get a math problem. But computers are very good at number crunching, yeah. So they're good at trial and error. So we should give a problem to a computer that it can solve, but after a lot of hard work. So as an example, if you remember, we talked about hash functions earlier. So one example for a hard work is that compute a message M such that the hash of that value starts with, say, 31 zeros. Yeah? 31 is some random number that I picked up. And normally if you take any message, yeah, and take a hash, then it will, with a high probability, it will not start with 31 zeros. So you have to keep trying. And eventually you will be lucky enough to hit a message that has 31 zeros. But because the hash is a strong cryptographic function, it is hard to actually reverse it, yeah? So if I generate a 31 zero output and I try to reverse it, find out which message gives me, that is difficult. So you have to just do trial and error, yeah? So computers are good at trial and error. So to make it hard, we must give them more difficult problems. So you just increase the number of zeros, for example. So instead of 31, we'll say output a hash that starts with 50 zeros. So the computer has to try more for that to work. So how does this help in Bitcoin? So what this implies is that to do damage to the system, the attacker must also do hard work, yeah? So people have to do hard work to make the system work, but that also implies that to attack the system also you must do a lot of hard work. So it prevents against denial of service attacks, and double spending is also prevented using this. So next slide, I'll try to explain how this is done. So how does proof of work actually help? So first of all, double spending is essentially reversing a transaction, yeah? So you cannot really have two copies of a Bitcoin. So double spending does not mean that I have two different copies of the Bitcoin running around, because that will imply that there are more than 21 million Bitcoins, for example. Yeah, it's against the protocol. So what happens is in double spending is that if there are two spends, then one of them will be reversed and the other will be forwarded. So preventing double spending is essentially preventing reversing of a Bitcoin transaction. So suppose I spend some Bitcoins B, some amount of Bitcoins be in a transaction, and then the work is constructed, the proof of work that I talked about earlier, is constructed from many such new transactions that everybody collects. So I made one transaction of this B Bitcoin, somebody else made some other transactions. All these new transactions are collected by all the miners around the world, and then they are combined into a proof of, a kind of work, a puzzle. So this puzzle is constructed from the transactions itself, and this proof of work corresponds to the solution of the puzzle. Yeah. So a solved puzzle or a solved proof implies that this transaction has one confirmation. When the moment the puzzle is solved and a transaction was included in that puzzle, that means the transaction has got one confirmation and it's sent to the network and everybody adds that to their system. So now to double spend this, you have to reverse that one confirmation. So that implies that you have to do again a lot of work to solve that puzzle. And by the time you solve that, the rest of the miners would have solved the next puzzle, yeah? So now you are actually lagging behind when you try to attack the network. So you must have more power than the rest of the network so that you can actually solve the puzzle faster than the other miners. And then you can add more blocks to the chain of your double spend than the rest of the system. Then that will be accepted as long as it becomes longer than the other chain. The longest chain is the one that is being used in the protocol, yeah? So what is the longest chain? All these things, I think it's too complicated, too long to talk about here. So I'll just skip that stuff. But you can always come to me afterwards. And to double spend, I must put it in another proof of work parallel to this one. And I have to solve the puzzle faster than the rest of the network, yeah? So that kind of explains how this proof of work helps in preventing double spending. And the more the time elapses, so suppose I wait for a day before I want to double spend it, then there are a lot of blocks added after that, yeah? Not just one confirmation, but maybe 50 confirmations, 100 confirmations. So now I have to do a proof of work for 100 of these blocks, which is kind of exponentially, it gets exponentially larger, the work, as the number of transactions increase. It's almost impossible to reverse the transactions after, say, 100 confirmations. So what happens is that's why freshly generated coins, yeah? Normal transactions, you wait for 6 confirmations. But when a Bitcoin is freshly mined, that coin has to wait for 100 confirmations before it can be used. So 100 is a safe number. That's what people assume. And how does this actually help? In a more simple way, the more people mine, the more difficult the puzzle gets. Because Bitcoin protocol is designed such that the time of puzzle solving should be constant. Every 10 minutes, a puzzle should be solved. So if more people join the system, then the puzzle becomes easier because then there is a lot of effort going in. So to make the time constant, the difficulty of the puzzle gets increased, yeah, to maintain that 10 minutes window. So as more people start mining, the puzzle gets harder. And then Bitcoin becomes even more harder to attack. So the more people get into Bitcoin, the more robust it becomes. So that's why Bitcoin is, for example, more robust than other currencies like Litecoin. Because the Litecoin the people mining Litecoins are not so much as the people mining Bitcoins. So to attack Litecoin, you don't need that much power as you need to attack Bitcoin. So in summary, difficult puzzle is equal to more secure, and more people mining is equal to difficult puzzle. So mining is not only for getting Bitcoins for you, but it's also for helping the network become stronger. That's the idea. So that's why people should be encouraged to mine Bitcoins. So finally, I'll end this talk talking a little bit about the security. So one of the security issues in digital currencies is double spending. So I just explained how double spending is prevented. Then there is this 51% attack, yeah? What I mentioned before, that to reverse the transactions, you need more than 51% of the power. In fact, you need more than close to 80%, because 51% is not, it's theoretically a good value, but practically you need more. So even this is prevented because there's a lot of people mining Bitcoins. So to attack the network, you must have a lot of power. So Bitcoin kind of prevents against this kind of attack as well. And the other issues with Bitcoins is that your wallet is compromised, somebody steals your Bitcoin. So this is a very serious issue, in fact. And that's something that I don't think I have enough time to talk about how to secure a wallet and all. But everybody should be aware of the issues of this. And the other issue with Bitcoin I see is that you can trace a Bitcoin's history. So it is not really fully anonymous. You have to be very careful if you want anonymity in Bitcoin, because from the time a Bitcoin is generated till the time it is currently there, you can figure out which addresses it has gone through and the amounts. And you can actually figure out which other addresses are connected to the same wallet. For example, if a transaction has other addresses as inputs, then you know that these two inputs belong to the same wallet, for example. So a lot of information is leaked with Bitcoin transactions, and that's another issue. And the final issue, which is, I don't know, is if P turns out to be NP, then all these cryptography is insecure, and then Bitcoin will also collapse. But this doesn't seem to be likely as well. This is also an open question, whether P is equal to NP or not. That's more of a mathematical question. But yeah, so that's the end of my talk. Thanks.